All right, so I'm assuming that you've finished the first practice test, that you've taken the whole thing, you gave yourself 35 minutes for each section, and now you're wondering what to do next. What you want to do is you want to take the bubble sheet that I hope you used and click on the score tracker in your student account and enter into the score tracker exactly what you put on your bubble sheet, right? So let's say for section 1, you bubbled in 18 of the 25, 26, 27 questions. Depends on the section. Let's say you bubbled in 18 of those questions, right? And then you left the remaining questions blank. Well, in the score tracker, you'd want to do exactly that. You'll see something that looks like a bubble sheet. You'll click on add a test and it'll take you to something that looks like a bubble sheet, and you start making that thing online look exactly, the bubble sheet online look exactly like your physical, tangible bubble sheet, right? Okay. After you've made that thing look like your bubble sheet, you have two options. You can mark questions that you weren't sure about, and you can mark questions that you skipped, that you just never even got to. So in our example, you did the first 18 questions, but you never even got to the last 8 or so questions. Go ahead and mark those in the score tracker. You can mark them with a T. That just means you didn't have time to get to them. If you were unsure about any of your answers, you actually attempted to do the question. You got to it. It was question 12 or it was question 15. It was one of the first 18 that you got to, but you're like, I'm not really feeling that great about my answer. I chose D, but I'm not so sure if D is right. Go ahead and mark that question as unsure. So basically, you put in exactly what you did on your bubble sheet, you mark the questions you never got to, and you mark the questions that you were unsure about. One thing about the test, this is a side note, let's say you get to question 18, right? That's all you got to during the 35 minutes. You want to put in an answer for the remaining questions, not in the score tracker. I'm just saying for future reference, on your bubble sheet, on your paper bubble sheet, you want to guess like D all the way down or C all the way down. It doesn't matter what answer choice you decide to fill in all the way down, but you want to fill in something because there's no penalty for guessing. So you might as well get some points just by guessing, right? If you did that, if you knew about that and you bubbled in your bubble sheet, you got to question 18, but the remaining answers you just filled in with D, you'd want to mark those as skipped because the system is going to think that you thought the answer was D, but really you didn't have any idea what the answer was. You just like, hey, I ran out of time, so I'm going to fill in the remaining answers with D or with C or with B, whatever you want to do. It doesn't have to be D. But you fill them all in with something. You need to tell the system, hey, you know what, I didn't really answer these questions. That way, you will still get an official score. You'll still get, hey, look, if you had bubbled these in, this is the score you would have got. And you did bubble them in. You bubbled them in with C or whatever. But let's just note what you would have gotten to if we exclude the lucky guesses. Because essentially, if you get some of those questions right, it's sort of just dumb luck, right? You want to do that on test day. If you're not going to answer some questions, you might as well fill something in. But right now, as we're preparing, we want to figure out like, okay, so this is what your official score would have been, but some of these were lucky guesses, so we need to exclude those to give you an adjusted score. So when you start putting your information into the score tracker, if you can mark the questions that you were not sure about, that you tried to answer, but you really gave it a good shot, but you just don't feel great about your answer, and those that maybe you filled in an answer, but you just never even had a chance to think about that question, you want to mark those things so the system can start figuring out exactly what's going on as you're going through these questions. Now, when you click next, it will take you to a page that will give you an opportunity to repeat any questions that you weren't sure about and to finish any questions that you marked as skipped, right? Hey, I skipped this question. Even if you filled in an answer, if you marked it as skipped, now you have the chance to do those questions before you even know what your score is. And a lot of people skip this stage because they're just like, I just want to see what score I got. No, take the time to do the questions you never got to, right? You only got to question 18. You've left 8 questions on the board. Why not take this time after the test is over to do those as well and learn from them, right? So go ahead and do the skipped questions. Fill in your answers on this next page. So not on your first bubble sheet, but on the second page that the score tracker takes you to. And then rethink any questions you were unsure about. Now you have all the time in the world. You were rushed before. You were trying to get through the section. I hope we're not rushing, but there is that element of time pressure that can make us try to make decisions faster than we should make them. But now you have all the time in the world. Do you still think that your answer is correct, or do you want to change it now? You have that opportunity to change the answers that you were unsure about. Now, if you change them, it's not a problem. Your original answers will still be preserved, but you also have your new answers, and the system will keep track of all that, right? Once you've redone all the questions you were unsure about, finish the questions that you initially skipped in the timed test, then you click next and it will take you to your overview page. On your overview page, you'll see your official score, what you would have gotten officially. You'll see your adjusted score, which removes the lucky guesses, and you'll see your untimed score, which now brings in these two things. It brings in the questions you never got to, and it brings in the questions that you were unsure about but then ended up redoing. Now, maybe when you redid them, you kept your original answer. You're like, yeah, I think I was right originally. That's fine. That's fine. It will keep all that information. It'll say, haha, this is your untimed score. And so you'll end up with 3 scores, and it can give you a much fuller picture of where you're at with this test than if you just have your one official score, okay? Now that you've done all that work, it's a lot of work, but it's gonna pay off, I promise. Once you've done all of that, you want to start going over the questions you missed. Like, okay, I got question 7 wrong. Why did I get that one wrong? When you're going over questions you missed, you want to figure out at least 2 things, at least, as much as you can. You really want to understand it inside and out. Can you explain it to someone else entirely? But start with this. Do you know why the right answer is right and the wrong answer that you chose is wrong? Because when you get a question wrong, you're making 2 mistakes. You're missing the correct answer. You're like, nope, that's wrong. And you're choosing a wrong answer. So you're liking something that you shouldn't like, and you're disliking something that you should like. So you really need to understand both of those things. Most people, when they first start out, they are way too superficial in their review. They'll go back to a question, they chose C, the correct answer is D, and they're like, oh yeah, D makes sense. I say, hey, why? Why does D make sense? Why is D the correct answer? And I'm like, D is better than C. Okay, cool. Why is it better than C? What makes it better than C? Well, it's just like a better answer. That's not good enough. You want to become an attorney, you got to be able to tell the judge, my client is not liable for this contract because of this line right here and this phrase right here. That's what you got to do. And this is what you got to do on this test. You got to say, answer choice D is better because it says most athletes, whereas answer choice C just says many athletes, and that's not strong enough, or at least it doesn't strengthen the argument as much as many does. Therefore, it's a better answer, but here's why, right? You need to get into the exact words and phrases that make answers better and other answers worse. If you can do that, then you're going to start learning from each of these questions and seeing how they just repeat themselves over and over and over again, and you won't make those mistakes again, okay? If a question has a video associated with it, like a lot of these questions have been talked about in previous classes at one point or another. Some of them have never been talked about, but a lot of them have, especially some of the harder ones, because those are the ones that people tend to ask about. If a question has a video associated with it, it will have a blue link. And you can click on that blue link. The question number will be blue. You Click on that, and voila, there's a video from a past class. And a lot of people have sort of the same concerns about the questions that we get wrong, right? People tend to be drawn to the same wrong answer choices for the same reasons. That's not always the case, but click on the video, watch it, see if the rationale that you came up with for why answer choice D was correct and answer choice C was wrong is the same rationale that we came up in our class discussion. Now, not every video is going to answer all the questions you have about every question. But to the extent you can learn about this test before you go on and take another test, the better. So just dig in as much as you can. When it comes to the videos, there's almost always pretty complete videos for the games. So the game section is where you're asked to order things, like people are getting out of clown cars or things like that, and it's just like weird stuff. But most people struggle with the games the most at first and then end up liking them the most just because they're such they're the most learnable section. That doesn't mean the other sections aren't learnable. They definitely are. It's just that there's a lot of things to sort of concretely learn about the games, and if you can figure out how to diagram them, how to set them up, then you'll definitely improve on them. So what I would suggest for most people, unless you did extraordinarily well on the logic game section, I would plan on watching all 4 videos, one for each game. There are 4 games in the game section. Watch the video, see what we did in class, pull out a blank sheet of paper, turn off the video, and try to repeat what we did on your own, answering the questions all again. Right? Like, oh, okay, I see what they did. That makes sense. Let me go ahead and try to do that myself. If you can repeat what we did in class on your own after watching the video and answer all the questions on your own using the diagramming techniques that we used in class, then you're going to start to internalize the right approach for these games, right? And so almost everyone can benefit from watching those 4 videos. Granted, if the games went really well for you, then maybe you need to be focusing on other things, but that would definitely be a place to start, right? Start with the game section. Once you're done with that, go to logical reasoning, then go to reading comp or whatever. Okay, if you're really struggling, let's say you just totally bombed this test. Most people score between, I hate to give numbers because then everybody starts obsessing about the numbers, and you really just want to focus on learning right now and not worrying too much about what your score is. But I would say most people who are starting to prepare for the LSAT are scoring between 140 and 155. It's quite a range, but most people kind of fall into that range. Some people are definitely above that, maybe way above that. Some people are below that. So don't really worry too much about that. Just kind of bear that in mind. If you're in that range, it's not a big deal. Sometimes I think people have really unusual expectations, like, oh, I got a 155, I'm a failure. Well, yeah, maybe that's not where you want to end up if you're trying to get into a really good school, but you don't want to end up there. You need to do better. But now you know that 155 is kind of at the higher end of the range for a lot of people who are just starting out. Now, again, some people are way higher than that. They start with in the mid 160s. That's awesome, but it's also unusual. So there's a whole range of scores. Don't fret about that too much. But here's what I wanted to say. If you're not doing very well, if you got a lot of questions wrong, you got half the questions wrong or something like that, just start with the difficulty 1 and 2 and 3 questions, right? The difficulty scale is 1 to 5. You can see in the score tracker what the difficulty level is for each of the individual questions and each of the games. Just start with the games and the LR questions and the reading comp questions that are difficulties 1, 2, and 3. Did you get any of those wrong? If so, figure those out first. Those are easier, so you should be able to get your mind wrapped around them sooner, right? You might be banging your head on the table if you're looking at difficulty 5 questions all day and I just don't understand, this is so hard and nuanced, blah, blah, blah. Just start with the easy stuff. Get your mind wrapped around that because you're going to see all of that again, and you might as well do well on those the next time, right? Okay, so to the extent you can watch videos and review before you take another test, the better. When you are reviewing in the score tracker, you can mark questions with R, which just means review. So you're going to review them now. You got them wrong. You want to figure them out. Maybe even you review some of the ones you got right. You're like, yeah, I got it right, but I wasn't so confident about it. But you can mark questions for review to remind yourself to come back to that question in a couple of days. So sometimes people review a question and they're starting to understand it and they're like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But then they flag it for review and a couple of days later they look at it again, because you'd be surprised how much you forget in a couple of days. You come back a couple of days later like, oh yeah, this question, what was I thinking about this question? Then you try to do it again on your own and you're like, like I still don't think I see why the right answer is right. I remember it's D, but now I don't know why. So it can help once you're done reviewing as much as you can review to flag questions for review and then look at them again a couple days later, a day later, right? So my point is that every test is a gold mine. I'm just making this up as I go, but it's a gold mine of, I'm not making up the ideas that I'm trying to convey to you, I'm just making up the analogy. But it's a gold mine of information. And if you can dive in, make mistakes, and then try to figure out as many of those mistakes as you can, then you're gonna get all the gold pieces out, as many gold pieces as you can out of that test before you go to the next one. Don't make the mistake that most people make out there. They take a test, they get their score, and that's all they want. They're like, oh, I got a 148. That's where I am. Okay, let's go to class and see what I can learn. No, the learning has started. Dive in, watch the videos, figure out as much as you can. The more you can tear this test apart, the better it's going to be the next time you take one. And that's your goal every time you're doing LSAT, whether it's a timed section, a timed test, an individual problem from a study guide, or an individual game, or an individual reading passage. You just want to like dive in, rip it apart, get to the point where you could explain it to your neighbor forward and backward. And you're like, yep, I get it. Here's why. Here's the logic. You get it? Now I can explain it to you. We both get it. Life is better. And it now means you own it. And that's where we're trying to get to. So good luck with the review. And don't stress. I know it sounds like a lot, but just do as much as you can. Even if you can only do 3 or 4 questions a day, well, that's good. You're learning. Every time you're reviewing a question and really getting your mind wrapped around it, you're moving forward. And that's all I care about, which is why I don't want you to focus too much on the scores. Just focus on learning.